All right, folks, welcome back to the Sean Fontana podcast. We have another special guest today. He is a Scottish internationalist. He is also a junior Great Britain cross-country representative. He's got PBs of 3:49 over 1500, 30 minutes and 8 seconds over the 10k, 49 minutes and 22 seconds over 10 miles, and a sublime 2 hours and 20-minute marathon. Without further ado, I'm going to bring Craig Ruddy into the podcast. Craig, how are you doing? How are you coping with training during COVID-19?
All right, Sean, how's it going?
Good.
Thanks for inviting me on. Training's been a bit up and down since the whole COVID-19 situation kind of started. I think just to kind of echo what Adam and Kenny were talking about, ultimately the main thing is everybody's being safe, sticking to the rules, and just getting a bit of training in purely for the kind of health and well-being side of things just now. I think for myself, you'll know better than anybody. After the announcement of London getting postponed, I was pretty gutted. I wanted it to happen in April, but yeah, just now, really, it's just a case of getting out more for the mental well-being and general fitness than any sort of particular running goals or competitive goals. So yeah, it's been a wee bit challenging getting the motivation back up and going again. I took a couple of weeks where I kind of, just trying to get some sort of routine going was the kind of challenging part, especially when we got back from Portugal at the end of March. So, it's starting to come back around again, and the volume's starting to keep up a bit again. So, aye.
And have you completely changed your focus in terms of, I know that you've been doing marathon builds now for quite a while.
Yep.
Have you changed your focus during this part? Are you focusing on different aspects of your training just now?
I think now's a really good time just to change things a little bit, or try things that you might not normally try. Obviously, I moved down to Epsom last August.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's in the heart of Surrey, so there's tons of forestry, tons of trails. But when you're training for a marathon, you're on the road. You want the same runs so that you can, track progress, make sure that you're running easy days easy, make sure the hard days are hard. And what's been quite nice is just getting out, head down, without any real specific goal in mind, and just going exploring the trails locally. So I've found myself getting lost, running back on myself a couple of times, but it's been really nice just to get out in the kind of forest and stuff nearby. So it's been pretty good in that sense. But I think, like you said, the focus is no longer competitive goals. It's really just running for the love of the art and the sport itself.
Yeah, because I know that you were a bit. We were both in two different mindsets in Portugal when we heard that the marathon was getting postponed. We were in the same place probably, like in terms of fitness wise, but I think because you believe when you're maybe a little bit further away from the race that you still believe that you can get in a certain marathon shape and you can understand where you are at certain times, whereas I was looking for perfection and it was going far from perfect for me. So I'm happy that it's been postponed. You were a bit, sort of gutted because you're looking at that marathon, and then you were also looking at targeting an autumn or sort of into the winter marathon, like a Valencia marathon as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as of now, do you feel, if you take a bit of perspective and things, like, do you feel like where you were in Portugal to having London postponed, giving you this time to sort of recharge your body, your mind, because you've been working so hard as well? Not only were you trying to train for a marathon, you're actually working full time as well. Do you feel that this is going to help you be in a better place come, a marathon maybe in the winter time if things go well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping so. I mean, I think I came into the London build this year kind of not in great shape. I hadn't had a great winter. Not making excuses, but I moved down. Running wasn't the priority right away, even though I knew that London was kind of on the cards. So, and going back to previous marathon builds, London was going to be I think it was my 6th marathon build or 5th marathon build.
6, yeah.
Yeah, 6. So, I mean, I've come to realise that each marathon build is slightly different from the previous one, and that you're never going to get perfection as such. And I think that's where I've learned that taking a little bit of a step back and analysing a full 12 or 13 or a 14-week block, I know that if I can get 60 to 70% of that block done, in relatively good shape, then I'll probably have a good marathon. Mm-hmm. So I know that sometimes you're kind of chasing that fitness, but I kind of like that kind of pressure almost. It's like cram studying for an exam. Yeah. So it's like how much can I squeeze out of myself in the next couple of weeks or next couple of months, knowing that I've not maybe had the best prep. But I think what's going to be useful going forward is maybe just changing things a little bit, maybe running easy days a bit easier, seeing if I can get a bit more volume under the belt and just building a bigger aerobic base, and then seeing if that allows me to cope better with a full 12, 13-week block and hit, rather than 70%, hit 90%. So I'm kind of trying to take all the positives from it and seeing where that takes us.
Yeah. So if we sort of like rewind, I mean, I did see on your Power of 10 that, did you run for Central back before you ran for Inverclyde?
No, so basically,
yeah, I saw that.
So basically, there was a point where you want to get as many track races under your belt when you're running during the summer season. So one of the best ways to do that is running at the league matches. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I think I was maybe under 17, maybe under first year under 20. Inverclyde didn't have a big enough section of men to enter the men's league, so I basically joined Central second claim. Funnily enough, they needed bodies at that point to fill their spots. And one of the coaches at Inverclyde was pals with their coaches, so they kind of set it up that I would jump in and fill in when required. So I think I ran for Central maybe 2 or 3 times, but I canned it pretty quickly after that.
Because I saw there was a good on your Power of 10. There's a good, I don't know, about 7 years that it just says Central, 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 and then I'm like, where's this hatred came for wanting to mash them at the National Cross?
Listen, the Central boys are brilliant guys. You'll know most of them as well. But it's a nice competitive hatred. They've been really dominant, and rightly so, because the group they've got through there, they all work together, train hard, and they must set up their goals for the season. Individual goals, but there's this team goal, and I really like that. And I think that team ethos is something that I'd love that my club could have, and other clubs across Scotland could have. And they're setting the standard in terms of team events. Yeah. And that in turn is only going to drive individual performances up. I'd like to think that Inverclyde had a little bit of a kind of saying that at the start. Back, God, I can't remember how long ago it was, but we kind of won 6 relay races in a row, and people don't like that when one club dominates. Mm-hmm. And that kind of set the ball rolling for other clubs to try and take us down. And Central they've absolutely dominated in the last 10 years. So, hats off to them.
And I guess success breeds success as well. I'm guessing it started as far back as Ali Hay for the Commonwealth Games in Delhi. And
even before that, you've got guys like Robert Russell as well.
True.
Top national cross country runners. So,
yeah, I think
good guys.
Yeah, because I get into athletics quite late, so I'm kind of behind the whole. I think Ali Hay was the first person I really saw from Central. smash it. And then there was that John Newsom as well. He was a solid cross country runner in his day.
Yeah.
And then the likes of your Butchie and your Crow now are just, they're following in the footsteps, which is really cool. And then that, maybe Ali Hay and likes of Robert Russell inspired them to get into running. Like, that leads me on to a good question of, how did you get into running? Was it because you saw an athlete and you wanted to emulate that, or was it a hobby at school? And how did you start in the whole running scene?
It was there's kind of a couple of reasons. So I did do indoor athletics in primary school, and I was okay at it. But like most boys in Scotland or Britain, they want to be footballers, and so I played football kind of under 11s, under 12s, and was pretty rubbish at it, to be honest. And I had a couple of operations, I had a hernia op and I had a knee op in 2 summers back to back, and I decided that I didn't want to go back to football, so that wasn't going to happen. So that was kind of first year of high school. I decided that football wasn't going to be for me. Mm-hmm. And my dad, I remember at the time saying, no problem at all. That's fine. You can quit football, but you're going to pick something else and you're going to stick at it for at least 6 months.
Right.
He said, I don't care what it is, pick something. And it just so happened that the high school that I was at, Janice Hendry, was the PE teacher there. Mm-hmm. And a couple of my pals in school and that I hung about with, they were in Inverclyde. So I decided that I would go along there just because there was familiar faces, and kind of never really looked back. The setup at Inverclyde from a junior perspective, even at that time, in its infancy was good, but it's just went from strength to strength, surrounded by really good guys. When I was 17, Mark Pollard then came back from university, so from Greenock, studied in Edinburgh, came back to Greenock. So then, just as that point where a lot of people drop out, I was starting to get people coming back. Mark then was running with Tommy Murray, and that kind of kept me in. And it turns out Tommy Murray's my mum's cousin. Oh, so wow. I don't know if anybody's heard of Tommy Murray, but Tommy Murray was a ridiculously good cross-country and Scottish internationalist for many years.
Is this the guy with the white gloves?
Tommy in the magic white gloves,
Magic white gloves. That's my Mark Paul.
The story goes that Tommy was sponsored, or was kind of on the cusp of getting a sponsorship with STa&x, and he said that he wanted a big sponsorship from them, and they said only when you win the National Cross. So he cut out STa&x logo and stuck it onto his magic white gloves, and then he put his hands up when he crossed the line at the Scottish National Cross as the winner, with the STa&x emblem on his gloves. So they just absolutely loved him. So it was great, growing up running with Tommy. He used to get you kit and he would drop you stuff, and he'd fling you a tracksuit every now and again, and so it was good.
And then not only did you have Mark Pollard, did you then have guys like Kev Kane come in at that time, and the Irish boys as well, the two brothers?
Yeah, so we had. Again, I think athletics is a funny one because we get a lot of stick in Inverclyde for that, bringing in ringers and stuff. But there was always a link back to somebody. So Mark knew Kev pretty well, and Kev, for people that don't know, he's a bit of a character in athletics, and he actually lived with Mark for a few years. So when he came down, he was living with Mark, and he was running with Mark and training, and it just made sense that he would run for the club. And it was Kev Kane that then got Andy Douglas to join. Mm-hmm. And then Mark knew Dan Mulhare, the Irish internationalist. He studied at Napier in Edinburgh, mm-hmm. and he knew Mark. And again, just through those links, he moved back to Glasgow for work, having finished uni, and Mark just dropped a line. Do you need a club? Mm-hmm. It was just a case of, why not Inverclyde? Do you know? So there was always a link, and then obviously like yourself, you know, it was the same when you joined Inverclyde. It was, you know, I'd like to think there was no real pressure on it, but it was, you know, you were talking about, you know, the club scene and coming back from America and back up from London and all that sort of stuff, and you know, I just asked the question, you know, and try to dress it up in a way that was, you know, at least enticing for you, you know. So yeah, no, I think athletics is good for that, because we're all pretty like-minded, and if there's going to be something that gives you that little extra incentive to get out the door and run and turn up and race, you know, use it as much as you can, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that again, that's how then we move on to you know, getting me to the club, me getting Adam to the club, Adam Craig. And individually, like we have a very, very strong team. Like we do, like when you think, when you talk about all the individuals that we have, like, geez, like you just go, we've got a strong team. I think we just don't have this. We're a strong team made up of strong individuals, whereas it seems like Central can come together as a team. You know, they're very, very talented, strong, hardworking individuals, but their team ethic, their team ethos is just maybe a little bit stronger than, you know, some of us Inverclyde boys that were wanting to do a marathon at a certain point, and we're maybe in different parts of Scotland or different parts of the UK. Whereas those boys are training with each other Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, or whenever it may be. They're get a nice sort of hub to like feed off each other. So yeah, like you're right. You know, sometimes it's about who you know instead of, you know, jumping into the most dominant club at that moment in time. Yeah. Every club has its day. So so before the marathon, you were a very strong track runner as a junior. You know, all the way up into your under 23 years, you ran 3:49 for the 1500. You picked up lots and lots of junior, district, and national medals. You know, gold, silver, bronze. What did you see the future as being the track at that age, or did you always plan to move up to the longer distances? Like, what was in your mind, even though you're getting success as a 1500 meter runner? You know, what made you sort of shift up the longer distances?
I think when I was doing track, the age that I was doing it, there was a strong group of guys coming through, and a lot of those medals, you know, great achievements, but they might have been, you know, yourself. Some people will maybe choose to do an 8 rather than a 15 that are actually 1500 meter runners. So the guys that I was competing against at that time as a junior were guys like Chris Gosson, Dougie Selman, Mark Mitchell, you know, Derek Hawkins, you know, the guys that are, you know, really, you know, a lot quicker than what I would like to run over things like, you know, 8 and 15. And it was something that, you know, I wanted to be as good as these guys and wanted to be as quick as these guys. I think I probably just, maybe the training wasn't quite right at the time, and I don't know. I did see myself as being, you know, I wanted to be a miler. I think most guys growing up, you know, that's the kind of dream, is they want to be, you know, quick and a good tactician and, you know, have that finish and all that sort of stuff. I probably didn't quite have all those tools, but it was something that I did, you know, I really wanted to chase. But come 2011, 2012, I was kind of looking at maybe moving up to 5,000. But it was really just an injury that kind of curtailed all that in 2012. I'd moved up to the 5,000, thinking there might have been a couple of opportunities there, you know, maybe some British international vests potentially, if I could get, you know, some of the standards. But, you know, again, barring injury, whether I was going to be good enough to get to that level, I don't know. But I think I was in an era that was just at the start of, it was starting to kind of grow. The tail end of my kind of era was like a Chris O'Hare, and then even off the back of him, the number of guys from Scotland that have come through over that distance, no chance was I going to be able to compete against those. And I'm quite happy to say that. I think you look at the times that these guys have ran, it's incredible. And I think my talents were always going to lie in the longer distances.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't want to believe that for long enough. I wanted to hold that I could be a miler. And having had conversations with Mark Pollard about the number of guys that want to be quick and fast, but he's like, nah, move up. You've got better chance, and you've got better equipment to cope with the longer distances. Whereas at that time I was coached by Laurie Spence, who, as far as a coach goes, he had every faith in my ability, probably more faith than what I did. Mm-hmm. And we stuck at it and stuck at it and stuck at it, and it just didn't quite pay off over those distances. And that was kind of the reason why we started to kind of move up towards the kind of longer distances, but also an injury in 2012 that kind of forced that change a little bit. Mm-hmm. Because obviously the 2014 Commie Games, like I said in a previous interview, that the standards were set from the previous games. Mm-hmm. In Delhi, with it being so hot and humid, and the standard you couldn't run as fast at Delhi in 2010, so it meant that the standards were a little bit softer. Mm-hmm. So I think what that did was it squeezed the guys that were already pretty good at 15. It really forced other guys to come through that were already a bit quick to chase that time. Mm-hmm. And equally then with things like the marathon and the 5 and the 10, it forced some of the guys that were maybe not quite as good at the 15. They kind of looked and thought, where's the space, where's the gaps going to be in this team? Mm-hmm. And what can I chase? And you'd guys like Ali Hay chasing the 15 along with Chris Mackay and a few others. And then obviously you've got the Chris O'Hares and all these guys, and Mark Mitchell as well. I mean, Mark Mitchell, ran extremely close to getting that time. You have guys like Gosson. So there was, all of a sudden, there was a bit of a buzz around athletics in Scotland, because there was all of a sudden a major kind of championship event that was on your doorstep and seemed pretty attainable. Mm-hmm. So that kind of forced my hand to go up, and having just come back from injury, I thought, I was thinking 10,000 at that point. Yeah. So that was kind of what forced the change, really.
Yeah, and then I'm guessing you're talking about moving up and representing Scotland at the these international events, these senior international events. But one of your highlights must be that you represented Team GB as a junior at the Eurocross Champs. I mean, how was that? You're stepping up into you've competed as now one of the best in Britain. You're now stepping up into competing against the best in Europe. How was that? How was that experience?
Yeah, I mean, that I've got really good memories of that kind of window. There was a kind of that cross country season. I was running really well. The goal at the start of the cross country season was to make the team. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I was in my second year at university. The training that was set by Laurie was really good. The volume had increased a little bit. I think I was doing about 70 miles a week average at that point as a 19-year-old, which some people might say is a bit much for a 19-year-old, but I think that's just what was required. I ran arguably one of my best races at the Gateshead International 2 weeks before, or 3 weeks before Liverpool. Mm-hmm. And I finished third at Gateshead. So there was a guy called Ross Millington had won it, and I can't remember who was second. I think it was Fearless. I can't remember. So whoever was second, I just remember finishing that race, finishing third at a British cross match, phoning Laurie after it and saying, that was a brilliant race. I ran it really well, and I finished third. And obviously the goal was Liverpool at the cross trials to make the team, which is a 6-man team. And the first thing Laurie said to me was, "You're going to have to beat both of those boys if you want to make that team." So I've just ran one of my best races, and all of a sudden the expectation is you need to beat both of them to make that team. And my mindset throughout that whole block was really strange. I don't know what it was, but I was making that team. That there was nothing that was going to stop me from making that team, and it was a really strange thing. Like I'd envisioned what the hotel was going to be like. I knew what the course was going to be. Come the Europeans, turned up on race day at Liverpool. I did beat both of those boys at Gateshead. But a spanner in the works was that Conor McNulty, who had come out of the blue that year, ran an absolute storm at Liverpool and just pipped me. So I was actually 7th,
right.
But he'd obviously had a bit of a run-in with a certain Simon Horsfield and got himself disqualified, and that I was automatic to go into the team as the kind of next person. But no, it was really good. All of a sudden I got to see guys that you would see on the cover of Athletics Weekly, or you would read about, and you would see on forums or whatever at that time. Guys like Andy Vernon, Keith Gerrard, all these guys, and all of a sudden I'm sitting having dinner with them and having breakfast and going for a jog, and you feel a bit of an outsider at first. And I think the only thing I would say about that trip was that I was the only Scottish person. I was the only non-English person on that whole trip, and because of the controversy that surrounded Conor, that was kind of what kind of surrounded the conversation directed towards me. It's kind of like, oh, have you heard from Conor? But apart from that, it was good. The guys were really good. The guys that were in the team that I was in was Lee Carey, David Forrester, Ben Lindsay, Mitch Goose, and Ross Murray. Shared the room with Ross. Youngest in the team, funny, quirky, like really good guy. And the race itself was just insane. It was just I've never experienced anything like it. I mean, if you remember running at the inter-counties for the West, and at Nottingham when you run up the hill, it was kind of like that, but quicker and just more furious. It was crazy. No, it was a really good event, and it taught me quite a few things. And I think having that belief beforehand that I could make it and going forward, what I wanted to do was make that team again. I've never managed to do that, unfortunately, but we'll not talk about that too much.
Yeah, but there's every dog's got its day, and then is an important question is you've ran a lot of cross through your years, and do you feel that it's essential for a junior or even any athlete to get into the cross country, or what's your views on it? Do you feel that it helps boost development?
I think it does. I think if you look at any athlete that that's worth their salt, you'll see that they'll have served their time at least a little bit in cross country. There's not many athletes that won't have competed at cross country. I mean, I think the year after I made that Eurocross team, I'm pretty sure Chris O'Hare made the team.
Yeah.
The year after. So you've got guys that are now achieving really, top level stuff that they would always say cross country is kind of where I think you probably learn how to race a little bit more in cross country. You're not going to run quick all the time. You can see that even courses like Liverpool, it's pretty flat. But no 2 years can be the exact same. Sometimes it's snowing, sometimes it's muddy, sometimes it's firm, sometimes it's windy. So the conditions play a huge part, and that can change the whole outcome of a race. it's also just a bit more fun. You know, it's not that same kind of grueling lap after lap on the track where you're kind of getting a bit anxious about whether you've hit that split right, or if you've gone too quick or whatever. Cross country, it's just a case of head down, work, and see what you can do. And it's, I don't know, there's something quite nice about that, I think. And I think it does, especially as juniors, you can see really good progression. I finished second last at my first ever national cross country.
Yeah.
Yeah, at Falkirk. So second last, and then I remember just thinking I hated it, but there was something fun about it, being part of the team and all that sort of stuff, and thinking I can definitely do better than second last. No, it can't get much worse than that, really. Well, it can, but so for me it was a case of, well, how much better can I get with a wee bit of training? And that was my first year doing that, when I did that, and then I think I moved up from second last to 10th and under 15s. So no, cross country definitely serves a massive role, and especially over the winter. It's such a Britain winters last what seemed like forever. So
Yeah.
if you're not competing during that time, it's hard to keep the motivation going. So it definitely serves a great purpose, and I think the way that the season's set up with the cross country relays first, where it's a bit short, got a bit of a mix, is quite nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, definitely it's fundamental as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, you're right. There's, I mean, a lot of great athletes have, especially for Scotland, have won that national cross and on to then represent Great Britain at senior level, over World, Olympics, European Championships, you name it. So it does seem as if it does serve that purpose, to a platform to help you propel off onto the summer season. So then, you're having great success as a junior on the track, and then you're moving at a senior level, and you're still having great success at national level over the 1500 and the 5k. You're winning bronze in the 1500 in 2011 nationals. You win silver in 2012 at the 5k, and then also you win silver again in the 2013 national. So you are again on the podium at the middle distances, but then later in the year you decide to move up to the half marathon later in the year, and then you look towards your marathon in Warsaw. So what, again, probably some, I don't know if, is this a similar thing to the 1500 back as a junior, like where you started getting some success at the 5k, but then you quickly move on to the half marathon distances?
Yeah, so in 2012 I had an injury. I had a really good start to the season, but I got a hip injury, and it boiled down to just overtraining, training too hard, not training smart. And what happened was I was out for about 8 months. I managed to kind of get through to about June time in this season, but I'd already ran a pretty good PB. Scottish Championships I managed to just about get to, but then I had to pack the season in after that, and then I was basically told just rest, and so I took a long time off. I think it was about 8 months of no running at all, and never really got to the bottom of what the injury was exactly. So in that time, I was starting to get a bit disillusioned by getting back to running competitively. And obviously the Commonwealth Games were coming up, and I was thinking, that was the goal, was to try and at least get close to those times, or even scrape a time and maybe make a team potentially. And basically, when I came back from injury, I was just running. There was no real set goal, and then the more I started to run, the quicker the fitness was starting to come back, and then all of a sudden, you start competing a little bit. And I think I just, looking at the 1500 metres, the 5000 metres qualifying time, it was just beyond me, I think. So we started looking at the 10,000, and I think the qualifying time for the 10,000, it was 29 minutes for Glasgow. It was 29 flat, I think.
Or 2050.
It was relatively
Soft-ish. It was very.
soft.
Uh,
It was softish. I think it was 29 minutes because I'm not sure that Callum ran much quicker than that at that point, and he ran for Scotland at
yeah.
2014 for the 10,000. So basically, what happened was that because I'd missed quite a bit of the track season in 2012, late 2012, and then not quite hitting it at the start of 2013.
Mm-hmm.
From a 10,000 point of view, I decided, partly from a running point of view, but partly just from a life experience point of view, that I wanted to go to Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So I went out there in December, kind of November, December, to run their 10,000 metre trial.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of when I went out there that I saw a different side to training that I'd never seen before. There was a lot. There was a lot of hard running, but there was a lot more tempo type running, threshold running, longer reps, 12-minute reps and things, and I actually coped quite well with it. And the guys that I was out there training with were running really quick times off this type of training, and I kind of thought, why am I not doing that kind of stuff? So when I came back, the goal was still 10,000, but at that point the training kind of changed a little bit, and I started to kind of dictate the sessions a little bit more with the training group, based on some of the stuff that I'd learned when I was in Australia. So that kind of lent itself towards, it gravitated more towards the longer events than it did towards the shorter events.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because I could see that I was coping quite well with the longer stuff, I kind of thought maybe the longer stuff might benefit me more, or it might pay off more. And then at that time, Stephen Trainer and Mark were training for marathons, and some of the stuff they were doing in the pre-marathon build was quite similar to what I was doing. So I would jump in with some of their sessions, and then it just slowly kind of transgressed that a lot of the stuff they were doing I was quite good at, and it tied in with the races that I was doing. So I kind of slowly transitioned across from Laurie to Mark.
Mm-hmm.
I was probably training with using Mark's kind of program effectively for about 6 months before I actually said, look, you may as well coach me because I'm doing all your sessions. The plan's pretty much going along with what you're kind of setting. And he said at that point, you're going to do a marathon then? And I was like, nah, I'll do 10Ks and I'll do halves. I'm not doing a marathon. And that was in 2015. And I think he just slowly worked on me. I remember watching them doing, or kind of running part of their marathon session. There's a 5K loop that they used to do, or they still do in Greenock. And they would just do like 8-9 laps of that in their marathon sessions, and I was just like, nah, that's not for me. That's not what. No, I already gave up. The 15. Then I gave up the 5K, and now I'm having to give up 10K. I'm giving up this track kind of ideal that I wanted to kind of chase, this dream of running on the track, and I was kind of bludgeoned into kind of thinking actually I'm going to be a road runner. And I don't know. I think at the time I kind of thought that was maybe a bit soft and a bit of a way out, but actually, it's just a whole other entity on its own, aside from the track, and it's the training that's been applied since I've moved up to marathon it's been really insightful. I've been able to actually run quicker over some of the shorter distances off the back of some of the marathon training.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the reason. It was kind of partly forced upon me through injury, kind of, and then obviously just transitioning across to Mark and learning a few new training methods when I was in Australia. That was kind of the reason that I kind of jumped from 5K runner to 10K in marathon, and it was a bit of a kind of sudden jump, but you know yourself, your athletics career isn't necessarily going to be the longest serving thing, so you kind of want to maximise your potential at the event that you might be, best at, and that's why I kind of moved up to marathon. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know that you cut your track sort of pedigree short, but maybe subconsciously you looked at people like Callum Hawkins and Derek Hawkins, who both made, like you were saying, the quick jump to the
Yeah,
marathon because they were starting to realise their potential at those longer distances, and that probably subconsciously was in there going, well, if they can do it, then yeah, well, why can I not do it?
yeah, no, and I mean, you only have to look at Derek and Callum to see that they've rewritten a lot of their other PBs, having moved up to the marathon.
Yeah.
Callum more so than Derek, but then obviously Derek's had a few injury issues. But yeah, it's I'm still. I remember doing a 1500 meters off the bat after my third marathon, in between Berlin and Frankfurt, and I think I ran 3:52 or 3:53, and I was thinking, it's not super quick, but for a guy who is kind of giving up the ghost on that kind of race format, I was actually pretty chuffed. So I do think there's PBs that can still be rewritten, at the lower end, 5k and 10k, and whether that's on the track or whether that's going to be on the road, remains to be seen. But no, I think that the marathon training just highlights how much value you can place on low intensity running and how much that actually pays for some of the kind of shorter distances.
Yeah. And then also another myth of, the old school way of you didn't want to move up to the marathon, quote unquote, too early. You wanted to maximise your 15, you wanted to maximise your 5k, your 10k, and then get onto the half marathon and the marathon. Again, we've kind of fed that belief, but people like the Hawkins brothers have absolutely debunked that. There's a lot of athletes out there that have moved up to the marathon, call it premature. Yeah, so I feel like it's becoming a bit of a myth to sort of maximise your potential out of those things, because like you just said there, the marathon training can actually maximise your potential over those distances by getting that strength and getting that back end endurance. So you're in the thick of your first marathon for Warsaw. You're finishing ninth. You're running 2 hours and 26 minutes for your debut. A major marathon here. I mean, in terms of you're talking about injuries and niggles here and there, and then moving to the marathon to try and maybe subside those niggles. What was your first marathon build like? And then also, how did you feel Warsaw went in sort of your opinion?
So I come off the back of a track season where I was running okay. I wasn't running brilliantly, but I was running reasonably well. And it was, I looked at this program that Mark had set up, and he's detailed what the paces are going to be. So when you're running on the track and you're running 400 meter reps and kilometer reps, and then all of a sudden you see this marathon program getting put down to you, and you see what the paces are, and you think that's not that quick. But obviously the volume's significantly higher. So I think when I first started that block, I probably went a little bit too hard on the sessions, and thought I could, I think I thought I could do better than what had been set out in front of me, in terms of the pace. And yeah, the first sort of 5 weeks of that 12-week block, they went quite well. I raced Dublin half marathon, the Rock and Roll half marathon. Really windy day, and I was hoping to run a PB, and I didn't do that, but I won the race quite comfortably, which really took me by surprise. I didn't expect to win, a big race like that. But after that, the wheels started to come off a bit. I think probably what I found was my limit was maybe half marathon or 20 miles, say. I started to get a couple of little niggles, hip niggles were coming back again. So a lot of the volume all of a sudden really dropped off in the last half of the build, and I was just scraping by. on hindsight, or after the race had finished, spoke to Mark, and he said, I kind of semi-thought about pulling you from doing the race, but we never really had that conversation because we just wanted to see where it was going to take us in that first one. The race itself, I'd been kind of nursing a hip injury, but on the day there was absolutely, whether it was adrenaline or not, I don't know, but there was absolutely no pain whatsoever. It was really nice course, really flat. There was very little in the way of crowds, though. It was pretty scarce. I think the actual, it's not a massive marathon in terms of numbers. I think there was maybe 4,000 to 6,000 people running it. And the elites that were there, I think it was maybe one in around 207 to 209. There was a massive gap. So that ninth place sounds really good, but the reality is that there was maybe about 12 elites running, or 15. Quite a lot of them had dropped out, and the guys that were ahead of me were 8-9 minutes ahead, at worst. So it was quite a barren run. I was running on my own for most of it. And the last 10k was horrible.
Right.
Horrible. The cramping my hamstrings, cramping my calves. But I figured that if I stopped, I wouldn't get going again. So I just had to kind of get myself to the finish line. And the time was reasonable. It wasn't terrible. But I think if I was to look back at my splits, it would be showing me running at sort of 2:21, 2:22 pace for most of that race, and then I must have lost 5 minutes in that last 6k, 7k. So yeah, it was quite a good one to do because it was low key enough that it wasn't going to draw too much attention, but it's a marathon. Doesn't really matter where it is, it's a marathon. So I was able to reflect quite nicely on that, and then the plan was to go and do London off the back of it. So no, it was interesting, and I think it just showed on reflection what what the marathon is, and how don't underestimate the training, and learn. As long as you learn from it, that's the main thing. Which is what I've done. I think barring Frankfurt disaster, every marathon that I've ran, I've managed to run a PB officially. So I try and take hope from that everyone's been better than the last. So it shows that I think that shows that I'm learning every time and take something from it.
Yeah, so, and also but one of the things that was really interesting was at one point we were having a conversation and you said how your average mileage throughout that marathon build was around 50 miles or 60 miles a week.
Yes, I think if you look at that block, if you look at the whole 12 weeks, the average worked out at like 52.
So basically, you, on the day of the race, done half your mileage in one day almost, but still was able to run 2:26. So that's I mean, that's commendable in itself,
Yeah, I mean, I think that was kind of what it showed, and every time I finished a marathon, Mark will quickly have what the peak week, what my peak week was in terms of volume, and then what the average has been over the 12, 13 weeks. And again, the average doesn't tell us the full story, because obviously there's some weeks where it's higher and some weeks where it's lower. A lot of the reason that my volume has been a bit lower is not necessarily through choice. It's just been that I've been nursing a little niggle, or I'm scared that I'm going to break down, so I don't do as much volume. But then the way that our training's set up for each marathon block is that the hard sessions are hard and they're really long. So there's not a long run in the week. It's just easy running, 80 minutes or 20k, but at a reasonable clip as long as your heart rate's in the right area. And the actual marathon sessions itself, right from week one, are like 35k, so 20 plus miles. And you're doing that maybe that varies in terms of intensity. Sometimes it's just an easy 20-mile run, so it is kind of just like your easy Sunday long run. But at least 4 or 5 times you're doing a hard 22, 23-mile session. And you can't be underestimated. But if you get them done, and the confidence you gain from that, knowing that you can get round at a reasonable clip on these sessions, just stands you in good stead going forward to the actual race day itself.
Yeah, and then like you said, you swiftly move on to run another 2 marathons only 5 months apart. Which was that in the so you go and run London Marathon in April in 2 hours, 22 minutes and 22 seconds, all the twos, and then you go to Berlin in September, just 5 months apart, and you go and run again 2 hours, 22 minutes, but you do go quicker again. You run 2 hours, 22 and 9 seconds. Was that in the plan? Was the 2 marathons in the plan, and then also, how were you able to recover so quick, rebound within 5 months, and get onto another marathon and run quicker again?
It was in the plan, but after, and what's interesting is that the Warsaw was on the same days. Warsaw is the same day as Berlin typically. Mm-hmm. So in 12 months. In a 12-month window, I ran 3 marathons.
Oh wow! Yeah.
So I think I was just eager to kind of go to Berlin. I'd missed out on it. I did Warsaw instead of Berlin because I couldn't get into Berlin. And the training for London was tough because it was through the winter, and I kind of figured that a late summer, early autumn marathon might be a bit easier. So I just decided, we'll go ahead and we'll do Berlin as well. The recovery between London and Berlin was interesting. It was catching up. That Warsaw build and then into the London build, because there wasn't too much between those two. I think it was 6 months between those two. So I was relatively fresh for London, but I was starting to kind of feel it in the Berlin build, and the training went okay for Berlin, but I felt like it hadn't gone as well as I had it in my head it was going to go. But I think just having the 2 marathons behind me so quickly managed to see me through for Berlin more than the Berlin block itself. And come race day, I was kind of going through the motions a little bit. I was working hard, but I was a little bit disappointed because I was really hoping to use Berlin as a way to go under 2 hours 20. And I knew that 2 hours 20 just wasn't on from the training. So we kind of set it up that we're going to just try and run, as close to London time as possible, if not a bit quicker. And I thought it was off. I thought there was no chance that there was a PB on. I'd messed up my kind of calculations. But come the 40k mark, I look at the clock and looked at my watch, and I thought, wait a minute, if I run, whatever it was, whatever pace it was for the next 2 kilometres, I was like, I can actually just sneak under my PB here. And all of a sudden, it kind of came back to me, and I was able to kind of sneak a 13-second PB at Berlin. But the Berlin race was an interesting one because, again, I just found myself on my own. There was a group, the elite female group had just went off, and then that kind of disbanded, and I was kind of catching them towards the end. But yeah, I was running a lot of that on my own. They complained a little bit. The winners complained a bit that day about the weather. Mm-hmm. I genuinely can't remember it being bad weather. It was a bit wet, but I think I was just so switched off because I wasn't going to run as quick as I really wanted to. Mm-hmm. I wasn't going to do that marathon justice. Berlin's renowned for being one of the quickest marathon courses in the world, and I wasn't quite going to do it as much justice as I would have liked to. But no, it was still pretty good, and I think that what that did was it just it just nailed on the fact that you don't need to get a good block in to still run relatively quick, as long as there's a bit of training in there, and as long as you've learned from previous marathon races.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Nice. And then you don't do London in 2018. You then decide to do Frankfurt, and I'm guessing, you know, with this was maybe you learned from doing the marathons in such quick succession, one after the other, taking a wee break, and, you know, working on building a better base and getting recovered up to Frankfurt. You know, I know that so on your Power of 10, you have an official 2 hours, 17 minutes and 44 seconds with you know, with a little mishap along the way. But basically, I think here, because this is your fastest time, whether, you know, the Power of 10 or your Garmin or Frankfurt, you know, whatever, your physiology was roughly round about 217 to 218 shape. You know, so this is where you're in peak shape. I hope, I guess this is where a lot of people are going to be asking, like, you know, what was your mileage here? You know, what was your Monday through Sunday? How were you able to balance being, you know, you're working with the NHS as a physiotherapist full time, but also still preparing for the Frankfurt Marathon and getting into that great shape? You know, tell us, you know, you can tell us how your prep went, tell us how that day went, and then, you know, tell us how you can balance that being a full-time worker as well as trying to smash a marathon.
I think, you know, working full-time, it seems to work for me. It gives me a routine. And when I was living in Glasgow, I was working in the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital as a musculoskeletal physio, and it was a 10-minute cycle from the flat to the hospital, 10-minute cycle home. So, you know, starting at 8:30 and finishing at 4:30. You know, you're busy in work. You're thinking about a lot of things. You've got patients to see. You've got paperwork to do, admin. You've got managers on your case about certain other things. So yeah, when you're in work, your kind of mind's away from the marathon, or from training. But as soon as you leave that door, you know, it's just like, right, what do I need to get done now? What's on the cards for today? What do I need to get done? The good thing about obviously doing an autumn marathon is that you've got so much daylight on that side of the day, you know, after you finish work, that getting outdoors not too difficult from a daylight point of view. Living up in Annie's Land, having the canal right on your doorstep is, you know, brilliant for just going for your runs or doing sessions. So I would my week would typically be, if you look through Monday to Sunday, it would be two session days, and I would typically go Wednesday, Saturday for the session days, and every other day is just an easy run. That would be roughly, we would say 80 minutes or 20 kilometers, whatever comes first. So I would just get out and I would run. I run quite hard on my easy days, although hard is, you know, that hard is relative. I'm still able to recover in that with that time, and I think because I was getting fitter, that, you know, my average heart rate for some of these runs was kind of 145, but I'm running 6-minute miling or whatever. So I would just get onto the canal. So my goal was run out for either 40 minutes or to 10k, whichever one comes first, and then run back. So that was my routine. So I knew, so the canal, you know yourself, having running on it, you get to know all the little checkpoints, so you kind of, you know roughly what your pace is, even if the watch isn't beeping at you or whatever. So you're running along, and you just get that familiarity. And I think, you know, the biggest thing for me is having routine and consistency. It's just then about applying that discipline to do it on that regular basis. And I think that's where, you know, working full time for me, you know, that really lends itself to training. You know, obviously if your work is not as structured as that, then it makes it a bit difficult. So if you're having to work later evenings or start a bit earlier, that kind of throws the routine. But for me, the Monday to Friday 9 to 5 gig worked quite well. And I could leave most things, from work at the door when I left. So, I wasn't really thinking about work when I was coming home. So yeah, I kind of managed to balance it relatively easily, and one was good for the other. So running was good to de-stress from work, and work was good to distract you from what was about to come later on that day, or for that week. So it was quite nice. But the thing with Frankfurt was that I was able to. I would tell some of my patients what my true target was.
Right.
So I told that most people, I kind of said, like, I wanted to run under 2 hours 20, but I told a couple of patients who kind of garnered a little bit of an interest in my running. They would be asking me what event was coming up, and I was tell them I'm running Frankfurt Marathon. What time would you like to get? And half the time, yourself, when you say to someone who maybe isn't as aware of the sport, you say a time, and all of a sudden they're like, is that not really quick? So I would kind of put my actual target time. I would say it out. I think saying it out loud is actually quite a good thing, because it kind of puts the pressure on a little bit. So I maybe told 2 or 3 of my patients, I wanted to run under 2 hours 18. That's really quick. So all of a sudden there was a bit of pressure and a bit of expectation. They would be like, "Oh, we'll be looking out for your result." So then when you finish work, if you don't go out and do the training, then you're not going to hit that time. You're not going to achieve that target that you've set yourself. And not only have you've set that target, you've then laid it out to someone else. So then you don't want to kind of let their expectation of you down, especially when you're trying to work with people within that type of environment. So yeah, I kind of used that as a bit of a strategy almost to kind of put a bit of pressure on. So there were some days where you get home from work and you're a bit tired, and you sit down on the couch, get a cup of coffee, and then you're like, I don't want to go out. But then the reality hits and you go, well, if I don't go out, I'm not going to perform. So, what's it going to be? Session days I find easy. Session days I can get out the door really easily. The days that I find a bit more challenging is just your easy running days. You just got to go and get it done. And once you're out the door, it's fine. But sometimes the thought is just that little bit harder. And that's where having that routine and discipline comes in. So yeah.
Yeah, and then you were was Frankfurt where on average was your highest mileage?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, if you look, when I looked at London and Berlin, my average weekly mileage was 62 miles a week. And then for Frankfurt, I think it was 72.
Yeah.
There was a couple of weeks there. There was a couple of weeks, that are up at 100, but there was also two weeks in that build where there was a race, 10k in Stirling and Glasgow half.
Yeah.
So the volume maybe back off a little bit on those 2 weeks. So that kind of brings the average down. And then the volume really in the last 2 weeks where you're tapering comes down quite a bit. But the volume up until the kind of the taper weeks was probably sitting around about sort of 76, 77 miles. There was a couple of weeks in there, 90 plus, tipping up to 100 in some weeks. But the most important part of that was the actual training sessions itself and how that week's made up. It's the volume's only one part of the picture. So I know that I can run relatively well over the marathon with not so high a volume, but then that volume's at this a sacrifice volume for quality. So, and I think that's where it kind of pays. What I'd like to experiment with going forward is getting a bit more volume and those hard days just backing off a little bit and seeing if that has any impact.
Yeah, because also you do all your runs as single running as well. You don't go out and double.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that I'd picked up from Liam Adams out in Australia. He was kind of detailed a lot of his running. I mean, he kind of spoke about just doing single runs, and I quite like that. It kind of worked well. I've dabbled with double runs in the past, and I like it. But I think once you get to a certain volume, then double runs are going to become a necessity. You know, once you get to 100, it's really hard to get single days in. To kind of keep over that 100, you can do it, but the sessions have to be really big. But I've found that it's worked well for me so far in the marathons. But obviously, the expectation is you want to get better. So it's looking at, that's where now you're playing about with some things. Obviously, you can't quite go out and double run just now, but what about running lower intensity but a bit further? Does that have an impact on your fitness, and sacrificing that little bit of quality just to get more volume? And how does that play out? And that's something that I want to look at going forward, just to see where that takes us.
Yeah, and then probably a lot of people will be wanting to know about what would be a typical marathon session for you to prep you for, the 26.2 mile distance. What sort of stuff would you do on a Wednesday and a Saturday?
So Wednesday tends to be a little bit shorter in terms of volume, but the intensity is maybe up a little bit. So it can vary. So that there's times where it's maybe just a top up threshold. So it might be a 10 mile kind of threshold tempo run. So it would maybe be 10k at marathon pace and then a 6k lift. So for example, I might run 10k at 3:20 a kilometre, if we're saying that's marathon pace, and then the lift, the 6k, has to be 3:05 to 3:10 a kilometre. So the overall pace is slightly quicker than marathon pace, but not obviously as voluminous. Or it might be something like 3 times 2k, 3 times 1k, 3 times 400. There's sessions where it's been 6 times a mile with a minute and a half recovery, but looking to go at sort of 10k to half marathon pace. So it varies, or it might even be something like a wave run. So it might be 1k, 1k, 2k, 1k, but no more than sort of 20k volume. So that would be your Wednesday session typically. Then the Saturday session could be a mixture of marathon pace running and threshold running. So one of the sessions that we had set out to do when we were in Portugal was a 12k easy. I'll put that in quotation marks, but easy is not easy. It's still, you're maybe talking about 30 seconds slower than marathon pace per kilometre, so you're still running quick. But then moving on to marathon pace, it would be 12k easy pace, 12k marathon pace with maybe a 2k threshold lift, then 6k marathon pace, 2k threshold, 3k easy to finish off. That kind of format can change, that formula can change a little bit. You can make it 10k, then an 8k lift or whatever it might be. One of the kind of tougher sessions was it was a step down. So it was 8k, 6k, 5k, 3k, 2k, but that was at threshold pace, and the recovery would be 6, 5, 4, 3, 2 minutes. Minutes in between the reps. That's a tough session. I've had that in the last 4 marathon blocks. That session's been put in there, and I've said to Mark twice that I reckon it's maybe just a little bit too hard. I've only managed to do it once where I hit it really well, but it took me about a week to recover from it before I could hit the next decent session. So I think that one can pay off really well if you get it done, but you need to pick when you're going to do it, and then just let your body recover as you feel you need it. And let's say over a 13-week period, one session isn't going to make or break you, but it's looking at the whole kind of puzzle. And as long as you hit a couple of the key sessions within a certain range, I reckon you'll do fine.
Yeah. So I guess the listeners will be also wanting to know about the nutrition strategies as well. Like, what was your nutrition during training? What was your nutrition strategies to recover from training? What was your nutrition strategies when you went into the race? Also, what was how would you fuel for it? Was it gels? Was it carbohydrate drinks during training, and then during the races? How did you fuel your body?
Yeah, so I kind of dabble with a couple of different things, but ultimately I try and keep it really simple, because when I go training, I've not got the luxury of having someone on a bike passing me things, or setting up a station or a lap where I can leave things down. So
Glasgow.
So I've tried it a few times round Anniesland, and I've come back round and bottles have been nicked or whatever. So when I first started the marathon, I'd spoken to Derek about what their strategy was, and they talked about just using energy gel. So I use Science and Sport.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll have, so during a long session or the marathon itself, the strategy that I've kind of adapted or adopted is a gel on after about 20 minutes, 5k to 20 minutes into the race,
Mm-hmm.
And that's just an electrolyte gel. And then around about an hour or halfway, depending on how I'm feeling, I'll take on a second energy gel, but with caffeine in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll have a third gel around about the 30k mark. Again, I don't always take that, but if I feel I need it. And that's really it. Obviously, the gels that you take on are going to, or the number of gels that you take on are going to be relative to how long you're going to be out. You're going to be out for. The longer you're out, the more fuel you're going to need.
Mm-hmm.
I've found that I've managed that balance is just about right. And then what I'll do is I just take on water round the course
Mm-hmm.
when I feel like I need it. That seems to have worked well, but that's only because that's what I've practiced in training.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's tons of different companies out there that have got really good sports drink electrolytes that or carbohydrate drinks that might give you that little 0.5% during the race or pre-race or whatever. It's not something that I've practiced,
Mm-hmm.
and that's more just out of it's difficult to do that when you're training on your own. So I think there's definitely something in it, but for me it's about what can I easily practice, within training, and how can I replicate that in a race. I don't want to be taking on something that I'm not used to come race day. I think it's about trying to keep things, pretty much, as you have them in training or in your blocks.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of nutrition, again, I try and keep it quite simple. I don't try and complicate it too much. I cook every night, so I cook fresh dinners every night. I try and eat healthy when I can. I will have, the odd bit of chocolate. I'll have a bit of fizzy juice. I try and limit that though where I can. I don't think it doesn't give you anything, but almost just as a little treat. We sacrifice so much as athletes, from social things to food types that, I think we're allowed to let ourselves, be given these little, treats, as it were. You look at when we were out in Portugal, you only have to look at Kenny Wilson and him munching on his bars of Milka and drinking his 7-Up. Still going out and smashing out the runs. So I think a lot of I think as long as your main meals are nutritious and you're not getting microwave meals and all that sort of stuff, you'll be absolutely fine. And as long as you don't overindulge in the things that aren't beneficial, then that's fine. I try not to stress too much about it. I used to get quite worked up about what my breakfast was going to be on the day of a race, and if you're someone that goes away and races abroad, or even if it's just local and you stay in a hotel the night before a race and you wake up and they've not got your exact breakfast that you normally have, you start stressing. So I think that the more you limit the stressors and the things that you can't control, then fine. I think that pays well, especially for the marathon. The night before races or 2 nights before races, and you're running around trying to find a restaurant that just does a simple pasta dish or whatever. You get a bit worked up about it, and that's not going to help come race day, getting stressed about relatively trivial things. So yeah, try and keep it simple.
And what is your what is your go-to breakfast? What sort of is your high fueling? What sort of stuff do you have before a big session or before a marathon race?
So normally I would go porridge.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can really, for me personally, I just don't think you can get see past porridge oats. It's pretty filling, and it's relatively accessible across the board. And even if it's not, you can take the little porridge pots that you just pour some hot water into. Mm-hmm. So it's an easy one to kind of get hold of. So I would tend to have porridge, a coffee, and then some toast with jam. Mm-hmm. And I try and have that, quite early on. I try and have it about 3.5 to 4 hours before, right. And then about 2 hours before the race, I'll maybe have a banana, mm-hmm. Or an hour before the race, I'll maybe have a banana just to top things up before the race. In terms of sessions, it would a bowl of porridge or toast and banana with some honey or whatever would be a kind of go-to breakfast. Yeah. Pre-session.
Good. So we're moving on to 2019, and you get back to London, and you're going through a lot of changes at this point. You're going through, you're moving house, you're moving job. You're a bit all over the place, but you still managed to whack out a 2:20 marathon. That I feel that's, with everything that's going on, how you were able to keep your cool and still be able to, hold your own and run a 2:20 marathon. I think did you finish 5th in the championship as well at that race? 5th championship? Yeah.
So I was 5th in the championship, and I had to look at this the other day. Actually, it was someone had one of my cousins had asked me where I'd finished overall in London last year. I had to work it out because they keep the elites and the championship, the rest of the field separate in the results. So yeah. I worked out. So I finished 38th overall and 5th in the championship. Yeah. So yeah, no, it was. I think that was a higher place than my previous London. I think. Yeah. Or the same.
And again, when we were talking about London last year to previous years in the marathon, you spoke about how important pacing yourself to halfway is to then execute the second half. Yep. Talk to us about how London went in 2019 in terms of, you got 2:20, which is amazing, but maybe could that have been faster through better planning through halfway? Tell us your thoughts on that to help the listeners with their first marathon if they're looking to pace better the halfway mark.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of chat about how to strategize on do you do a negative split and all that sort of stuff, but obviously that negative split has to be relative to what your goal is. When I did London last year, it was obviously off the back of Frankfurt where the result wasn't quite what it seemed, and I was still a little bit angry about it. And the training for London last year went okay. It hadn't gone just as well as Frankfurt, but in my head I knew that I was capable of running under 2 hours 20, and that was the goal at London, was to run under 2 hours 20. I didn't think I was going to run just as well as I did at Frankfurt, but I was toeing the line, and the plan was under 2 hours 20. And it because I've had 2 marathons where I've ran solo for so long,
Mm-hmm.
I made my mind up that if there was going to be a group, I was going with it, within reason. And I found myself in a pretty big group early doors in London, and the pace wasn't crazy. It was maybe a little bit ahead of what I was expecting, but I thought it was going to slow at some point, and it didn't. It didn't really slow. It stayed about the same pace for at least 25k.
Mm-hmm.
So I was quicker going through halfway at London than what I was compared to Frankfurt by about 50 seconds.
Jeez, that's
So,
a lot.
so I knew I was on for a quick time, but I'm gonna blame Nike for that. I was wearing the X percents for the first time, so so things felt okay, but a marathon's a marathon. It's not a half marathon. It's not 20. It's not 25k. It's not 30k. It's 26.2 miles, 42.2k, and yeah, I probably just bitten off more than I could chew. But I decided that I was going to try and just race it a little bit more. So there was a group that eventually whittled down, and it was me, Paul Martelletti, and Gary O'Hanlon, and we were running alongside each other, and those are 2 seriously good marathon runners, and I think we were on for a sub 2:17 for a long way, and coming back in the second half, it must have been about 32, 35k. I started to wobble, and there's a part in London where you kind of come up a ramp.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what distance it's at, but you come up a ramp, and as soon as I got to the top of that, the gap from those 2 guys, just that elastic band just snapped, and I wasn't able to kind of hold on. I tried, and I was then fighting a bit of a stitch. So obviously the legs were feeling okay, but the aerobic system was starting to really suffer, and I stopped twice on the run in just before embankment, and lost a little bit of time. And looking back, it's really frustrating, because I think if I'd have just been a minute slower through halfway, I might have ran under 2 hours 20 and had an official sub 2:20 on my belt, but
You
it
stopped
wasn't
twice and still ran 2:20.
When I say stopped, I mean I stopped for about 3 seconds. Wasn't, because I said to myself, if I stop here, I won't get going again. But I had a stitch, and I was slowing down so much that I thought, if I don't stop and try and stretch it or something, I'm going to have to just stop anyway. So I figured I would try and control it. So I said to myself, stop, but it's literally stop, stretch, and go. And so I must have stopped for about, it couldn't have been any more than 2 or 3 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And then I stopped again. That was maybe for a little bit longer, but I was struggling at that point. And then I kind of got a bit of a second wind and finished it off. But the split, the kilometre splits in the last 6k were just they were just tumbling down. And it's not a nice way to finish a marathon. I think if you do all that hard work over those 3-4 months, you don't want it to boil down to making a mistake from your pacing in the first 20k.
Mm-hmm.
So my advice would be that you're better to be 5% undercooked in that first half than be 1% overcooked, because it can really come back to bite you, and all that hard work that you've put in seems like it's for nothing.
Yeah.
And you don't have as much to show for it. But I would say, yeah, if you can just hold it back a little bit, at least in your first one, so that you can get an experience. I think once you've done 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 marathons, start playing about with whether you want to do a negative split or, all these kind of things. But I think your first one, you just want to make sure that you do it justice and you do it effectively.
Yeah. And then you were saying about, how you still felt good at, like you did feel good at halfway. Your perceived exertion, you're saying you felt better at halfway through London than you did through halfway at Frankfurt. If I'm right in saying,
I wouldn't say I felt better at London, because I felt really good at Frankfurt, especially through halfway, and I was quicker through halfway than what I'd planned to be at Frankfurt. But I think when I went through halfway at London, it didn't feel as bad as what the time would suggest. That for the time that I ran, I would have thought I would have felt a bit worse, and I didn't. I felt quite good.
Yeah.
But that quickly changed after the next 10k, and whereas at Frankfurt, I felt like my race was just starting at halfway, whereas at London, it felt like my race was starting to come apart at 25 to 30k, so that was the difference. But I think having had the marathons in my legs before, I knew how to kind of survive it a little bit.
Yeah. It was interesting just because what we were talking about, the change in trainers where you were wearing a different trainer in Frankfurt to London, where we're talking about the Vaporfly giving you this 4% or 4 point something percent advantage. And there's two key elements here where, one, you run faster in Frankfurt off the shoes, and two, but you felt you went through halfway at London being not as good of a build, but you went through 50 seconds quicker at the half than you did at Frankfurt. But the difference was you were wearing those shoes, and this is where we can kind of link in this, where everybody, I think, has got these deep. Some people get negative feelings towards these trainers, and there's two ways you can look at it. The way is, you do feel that you're maybe moving better, but my biggest point with this is a running shoe cannot influence your mitochondria. That whatever's in your body is, this shoe may help with 0.5% or 1% in terms of your biomechanics and your running economy, but you've went through that, and you're gonna pay the price for it, whether you're in an amazing running shoe or not, and you're running faster or not. You're gonna pay the price. This shoe doesn't propel you onto great heights if you make a mistake or if your training wasn't there to back up the time that you went through. So it's just a little one for somebody text asking about my perception on the Nike Vaporfly, but then also, so my perception is that it may help, but it's not like when we watched the YouTube documentary on it being mechanical doping and why don't we just dope, and it's like, no, it doesn't alter your physiology, it just alters your gait to then hopefully help you be a bit more efficient to then run faster, but you still have to do that training to back it up. So, what's your experience in terms of the shoe? What's your thoughts on it?
I think there's definitely something in them in terms of they definitely help. I don't know how much of it is placebo. There's going to be a massive, because I'd say the difference between Frankfurt and London was my approach. I think in Frankfurt I was in really good shape, but I kept it controlled. I think I was almost holding back a little bit in Frankfurt, and when I got to halfway at Frankfurt, it felt fine. I didn't feel stressed, and I was able to get quicker. After a windy section in Frankfurt on the way back in. So I managed to maintain the pace, and pick it up a little bit towards the end. Whereas in London, I don't know whether subconsciously that, even though I knew I was going quicker, I was kind of just saying, "Oh, it's the shoes."
Right.
Even though, like, I might have just been using that as a way to kind of, make my excuse to Mark when he shouted at me for going too quick. It's like, "Oh, I was wearing the shoes though." I don't know. So no, I think they play a role, but I think it's more of it, it helps your mindset, and there's obviously something there that allows you to run a bit more efficiently, or it reduces the amount of energy that you're using. But like you say, if you go and run harder than what you're physically able to, the shoes aren't going to bail you out. They're not going to save you, and that's what I mean. London was my worst marathon last year in terms of how I felt, in terms physiology wise.
Yeah.
I had stitches. I had to stop. That's the first time I've had to stop in a marathon. So because I was starting to struggle, that's not the shoes' fault. But equally, it's I think the shoes definitely help, but it's the training that you put in.
Yeah.
The trainers are just another tool that might make things more comfortable and give you that little bit of belief that you can push it a little bit harder at certain points. But yeah, they're not going to. They don't take away from all the hard training that you do. You do the hard training. It's not the trainer.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So then that leads us on to now we're looking at London. It's the 28th of April. We're looking at London on the 26th. There, we'd have ran London again in 2020.
Yep.
But it's crazy times where full of uncertainty, and it's been postponed now to the 4th of October. Berlin's been cancelled, looking likely that because of social distancing, staying 2 meters apart, it is sensible to cancel or delay these races even further into later 2020, or even now going to be in 2021. Where's your head at with the marathon being on October the 4th, London being the 4th, and if it does go ahead, do you feel that you're going to participate there, or are you going to hold off and maybe look towards a race in December like Valencia?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think first and foremost, the most important thing just now is that we kind of get on top of the actual pandemic itself. Whatever way you can do that, if that's by socially distancing or whatever else. I think what I'm hoping that comes out of all this is that people realise how important physical fitness and health is. Because you take for granted that you can go out your door and go to work and all this other stuff. So when you're trapped inside and your one kind of perk of the day is to go out and exercise, or you do your class indoors. I think it's kind of shown you what exercise actually gives you. It's not just about that physical purpose and having a goal to attain. It's actually good for your general well-being and mental health. So that's the first thing. In terms of competition, again, I think we just have to be really sensible about it and almost just kind of put aside personal goals and just what's going to be best for society as a whole, rather than looking at the individual. Obviously I would love it if we could just lift the whole thing and we can all get back to normal really quickly, but I think you're right. I think it's going to be hard to see how we can get any mass gathering or mass participation events going this year, the way things are looking. For myself, the goal just now is just to continue training and playing about with a few things, listen to what the government are saying, and then assume that London's going to go ahead on the 4th of October. and I might try and get an entry for Valencia just as a backup or as an addition. By the time the end of the year comes, you might want to be doing a marathon every weekend just to get racing, at that rate. But it might just be another way to kind of, try something different. Can you do 2 marathons in 2 months, but sacrifice one as a training session, or whatever it might be? Because there's other thoughts about whether it could go ahead, but it might just be open to elites and championship runners only, or whatever. Who knows? I think, like I say, the most important thing just now is that everybody individually would do what we can to help the whole country get by. So, whatever that is, whether you're a frontline worker, or whether that's just keeping up with social distancing rules, but that's what you do. And let's say, obviously, using running as a tool to cope with everything, physically and mentally. That's the big thing.
Yeah, because this is like, I didn't think about this until you're chatting away. There is that, we've got people, we've got swimmers, we've got bodybuilders, powerlifters, football players, badminton, hockey, basketball. Some people need to, or track cyclists. Like, some people need to actually go to a specific location.
Yep.
Whereas you're just blessed that the fact that you can get out your door, put shoes on, and go left or right, and get something done. And again, that's where we're talking about, like, the impact that it's probably going to be having on people's mental health is going to be quite shocking. But then hopefully they do find, like, going walking, going running, or a podcast or an audiobook or some music will help their boost their their mental well-being and stuff. So no, you're absolutely right. We need to, first and foremost, is listen to the government, keep the social distancing going, and if we need to sacrifice those events, then so be it, for the health of our society and what we're doing. Because if we kind of can touch upon the fact that there's a country out there that's been quite less compliant with everything that's going on, which is going to also further this pandemic going on, because it's spreading through travel. Yeah. And if that doesn't get halted, then what happens later down the line, where these Americans are going to be keeping the spread going for longer because they're not complying with the rules and they want to go back to work. So this is also going to prolong the spread, and this is where I was thinking about races being sanctioned only for citizens, like national citizens of the country. I don't know how you police that, but like, again, Berlin, German citizens only, or people who are living in Germany for the past 2-3 years, showing a council tax bill or something along those lines, and have not left the country in a certain amount of time. London being national citizens, again, like British citizens only, in terms of And again, does that then help national level competition? Does that help boost? Because if you can't go anywhere, then the best in Britain need to go head to head with the other guys in Britain. Same with Germany, Spain, Italy. It'd be a really good thing for, like, basically homegrown sport. But again, that's just me rolling out a few ideas. But sorry, I was shitting on America there, but they do need to get their shit together, or this thing's going to keep spraying across the world, sadly. Don't drink or inject disinfectant. That's what of the day. So as we round up, I do a few questions at the end. Just you answer as quick as you can the questions. So question time. All right, you ready?
Yep.
So, favourite food?
Oh, I'd have to go pasta.
Yeah. Favourite running shoe?
I'm going to say, I'll say my gel Cayanos. They're kind of good old shoe, trusted shoe.
Yeah, no controversy behind them.
No, definitely not.
Favourite place you've ever run?
I don't think I can see past the Greenock Cut. Hometown, the Greenock Cut.
You've been to Australia?
Yep, telling you, if you get a chance once the lockdown's over, people, get yourself down to the Greenock Cut. 7.1 miles of lovely trail, brilliant, unbeatable views. Telling you.
Favourite music to listen to when running?
I don't really listen to music when I run.
No?
Just my own thoughts. No, yeah, no music for me.
No music, right? Favourite movie?
Yes, Shawshank Redemption.
Right. Split shorts or half tights?
Split shorts.
Favourite origin of coffee?
Oh, it's got to be Columbia.
Columbia. Favourite athlete? Can be any football.
Yeah.
Well,
Favourite athlete, I would probably say, from an athletic point of view, toss up between Callum and Laura Muir. Callum Hawkins from marathon perspective, and Laura Muir just because she's dogged as anything.
I like that. Good. Keeping it national as well. I like that. Favourite book?
Oh, talking about books recently, actually. A bit of a book club going with a couple of pals. Run with the Buffaloes is a brilliant book.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
I like that.
That's got to be one of my favourites.
And then favourite TV series?
Oh. We'll go Parks and Recreation.
What's that?
It's comedy.
All right. Okay. Your comedy
just to
is horrific. No, who's that guy that you kept putting on in Portugal?
Oh, that's really good. That's called First We Feast, Hot Ones.
What? No.
Get it watched.
The Scottish guy. No, the Scottish guy.
Oh,
Lemmy.
Lemmy.
He is dreadful. He is absolutely dreadful.
He's genius.
That is like he's a he's putting a bad name for Scots that we're all stereotype junkies and we all stay up middle of the night shooting up heroin and drinking iron brew and smoking a joint.
I know he's a genius. West of Scotland genius.
Anyway, Craig, that is our podcast over. Thank you very much for coming on board and giving us your insights into the marathon, your journey in the sport, everything that you've achieved. Hopefully some of the listeners can take some really good stuff away there for their first marathon or even their fifth marathon. They learn something.
Yeah. Cool. No, listen, thanks very much for having us on. And stay safe, Sean Fontana.
Of course. Thank you very much.
And well done on all your social media stuff. I'm getting lots of good reviews from people.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, yeah. Aye, good.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I'll speak to you soon.
Cool. Right. Cheers for that, Sean.